What's up, everybody? Dave here with Comics Games Life, and the new Crow trailer broke out a couple of days ago, and since it's come out, I've been dying to talk about it, so here we go. Now, I'd like to start off with some of the things that I didn't like about the trailer, and end the video with a couple of things that I did. So, the first thing I didn't like is it seems like they're trying to focus a lot of attention on Eric and Shelly's relationship. We see them spending time together on top of a building, in their bedroom, in the forest, and it seems like they're really trying to portray to the audience how much they are in love with one another and how they're soulmates. Which is fine because we do need that context. However, if we look back at the original 94 Crow, they were able to show the love that Eric and Shelly had for one another in quick flashbacks. Now it seems like the 2024 version, they're going to spend a lot of time focusing on their relationship, which I don't really care for because I feel that screen time is going to be taken away from the actual revenge sequences that happen after Eric is brought back from the dead. And while Eric and Shelly's relationship is important, it shouldn't overshadow the meat and potatoes of this film, which is the action. Because anyone who's seen the original 94 Crow or read the original comic books know that this story is about love, murder, and revenge, with the majority of the tension focused on the act of revenge. But another thing that they added in the trailer that we didn't see in the original movie is that we actually get to see how Eric and Shelly met. And apparently they met on the set of Squid Game, because I have no idea why they're wearing these pink jumpsuits. I don't know if they're in some sort of co-ed prison. Hopefully we get a good explanation as to why they meet like this and not a silly one. Now, the next thing I didn't like that they showed in the trailer was how they showed the story of the whole Crow mythology. Now, in the original movie, you have a teenage girl named Sarah who kind of tells the audience the story on how this is all supposed to work. And that's all we needed. We didn't really need any visuals. We didn't need any type of deep storyline to it. But in the trailer, it seems like we're going to get that because it seems like he awakens in some sort of giant warehouse with swamps or something like that. And it seems we have this guy who's kind of telling Eric what's happening. I don't know if this is supposed to be like the ferryman in the River of Styx or some sort of guide in purgatory or something like that. I really am not too sure. But they're actually showing us what happens when the Crow doesn't take Eric's spirit onto the afterlife, but instead brings him back to the real world to take revenge on the people who murdered him and Shelly. Now, the guy who actually tells the story, I'm not getting that same effect that it did with the original when Sarah was saying it. It seems more impactful when this story is told by a childlike voice as opposed to a grown man. Again, I think this is something they could have just kept real quick and real sweet, because most people who are going to come and watch this movie know about the original, have an idea what the story's about. And again, I don't think they should spend so much screen time actually showing the story, because I feel like they're going to take away screen time from the action, from the revenge sequences, and the overall ending. Now, speaking of the ending and the action and the revenge sequences, another thing that has me concerned is the villains in this new movie. Because in the comic and in the original movie, the villains are pretty obvious. We have 1010, T-Bird, Skank, and Funboy, and their boss being Top Dollar. Now, I don't know if Danny Huston, who seems to be the main villain in this new movie, is Top Dollar. If he is, then he is a far cry away from the original villain. Now, taking nothing away from Danny Huston, he's a great actor. He's played many a villain, but he ain't Top Dollar. In the original movie, Michael Wincott, who played Top Dollar, did a great job. He looked very much like the comic book character. And not only that, but at the end of the movie, they get into a fight sequence. I don't see Bill Skarsgård and Danny Huston going toe-to-toe with each other. So I'm assuming Danny Huston is going to be an original villain. If he is an original villain, then this really isn't a remake. This should have just been another Crow movie in the line of movies. Could have called it something else, The Crow, fill in the blank. And then they could have done whatever they want with it. But instead, they decided to do a remake and bring back the characters of Eric Draven and Shelly and whoever else they're going to bring back. So go back to the original movie. We have T-Bird, 1010, Funboy, and Skank. Now, these are the villains that tortured and killed Eric and Shelly. And in the original, we see Brandon Lee finding each and every one of them and taking them out. But before taking them out, he's making them know who he is and what they've done to him, so they can feel that fear and like, oh my gosh, we killed you. What are you doing here? And not only getting revenge, but also making them understand the depth of their mistake. So one thing they did show in the trailer, now I don't know if this character is T-Bird, but there's a part in the trailer where Bill Skarsgård comes up to a car with a gun in his hand, and a guy in the car looks up and says, "We killed you." So if you look back at the original Crow movie, Brandon Lee has a character T-Bird tied up in his car. And once T-Bird sees who it is, he's like, no, we killed you. You can't come back. This is the real world. You can't come back. And so I want to make a comparison right here because in the trailer, it seems like very quick, very to the point, nothing special. But in the original, this scene that played out was epic. And me talking about it totally downplays it. So if you haven't seen the original movie and you do plan on seeing this movie, see the original first and then watch this one. Or if you haven't seen the original and you don't plan on seeing this one, just see the original anyway. It's a cult classic. There's a reason why everyone's up in arms about this remake, including myself. It's a great movie. However, if you do watch it now, there are some things that you're not going to feel the full effect of if you were to watch it back in the 90s. Because when I watched it, Brandon Lee had just died. The news of that was still hot and heavy. You have the soundtrack, which was epic. The music played by The Cure, Violent Femmes, Stone Temple Pilots, Rage Against the Machine. All these great bands at their peak in the 90s were on this soundtrack. So there was so much to this movie that just had so much emotion and touched so many people. That's the reason why it's a cult classic. So this reimagining or remake of The Crow is under so much scrutiny. So back to that scene with T-Bird, there was so much emotion and intensity wrapped up in that if what we saw in the trailer was its reimagining, then the movie's in big trouble. Because that means they're missing the mark on these key events in the plot. So I'm hoping as the new trailers come out, we do see these villains, because I don't want to see Eric go up against a bunch of just nameless bad guys. Because if they're really trying to put all kinds of focus into the relationship and they don't put any thought or effort into the villains who actually murdered them, then you're doing the audience and the character disservice, because you're not getting that closure that we got as Brandon Lee took out each one of those characters in the original film. Now, the last thing on the list of negatives that I have before I get into the couple positives that I found, I did mention in my previous video, and that is Bill Skarsgård's look. Now, a lot of people all over the internet are talking about this. They don't like the mullet. They don't like the face tattoos. And there's been all kind of comparisons made, myself included, that this version of The Crow looks so much like Jared Leto's Joker. Now, to a lot of people, that version of Joker wasn't everybody's favorite. But DC and Warner Brothers can get away with that because they're going to continue to make Batman movies, and we're going to continue to see different versions of the Joker. Like I said in another video, we're probably not going to get that same treatment with Eric Draven. That's why it's so crucial that they get him right. Now, the comic book that came out, which inspired the movie, was heavily influenced by rock and roll, heavy metal. And we totally get that with the original Crow movie. Now, everything from the characters, the wardrobe, the city, the soundtrack, everything screams rock and roll, heavy metal. Now, let me ask you, do we get that effect when watching this movie? In my honest opinion, not really. The only places that I see that influence are with the actual character of Eric Draven. Given his hairstyle and his tattoos, to me that screams more emo than like heavy metal. But everything else outside of him is just kind of just normal. To be honest, I'm feeling a lot of John Wick vibes. Now, if you look at that scene where Eric is walking through that grand ballroom hallway or whatever it is, I don't know if that's top dollar. Well, I don't know if that's the main villain's headquarters or his home or whatever, but Eric's being shot up by all these bodyguards and personal security, and he's taking them out. He's shooting them. He has a katana. He's like slicing people up, and he's even utilizing the fact that he can't be killed to his advantage, and he's shooting through himself to kill other people. So we do have elements of that in the original, so I'm glad they brought that back. But this whole scene, to be honest, it totally does remind me of like the Continental, the High Table, and all those other characteristics of a John Wick movie. The scenes and the environment are a far cry different than the original 1994 Crow movie. And that's a shame. But what I dislike the most about Bill Skarsgård's look in this movie is his face paint, because it's different than Brandon Lee's face paint. Now, the whole inspiration for the face paint is because Eric and Shelley had this Greek masquerade mask in their apartment. Eric uses that as a way to paint his face to intimidate the people he's going to come after. And the Brandon Lee version of face paint looks exactly like the face paint from the actual comic book, where he looks kind of like a death metal mime. Now, the only thing I'm thinking why they didn't go with it for this new movie is because maybe that aesthetic didn't look good on Bill Skarsgård with the inclusion of the mullet and the face tattoos. And if that is the case, then they should have just got rid of the mullet and the face tattoos and kept their original face paint. Now, I don't think Bill Skarsgård could have pulled off the long hair that Brandon Lee did, which was another iconic characteristic of the Crow. So it does make me wonder why they decided to go that route. I know Bill Skarsgård is a great actor. I really enjoy his work, and I'm going to go ahead and use that to lead into some of the things that I did like about this trailer. And one of the things that I did like was, now I just got done talking about Bill Skarsgård's look and how much I don't like that, but I will talk about Bill Skarsgård's performance and how much I did like that. Because the immediate comparison between Brandon Lee and Bill Skarsgård, Brandon Lee has a martial arts background. He's Bruce Lee's son. He was trained by Dan Asano. So he is able to move fluidly and do like flips off tables and stuff like that. So seeing him in action is going to look a lot different than Bill Skarsgård's physical conditioning. Because although Bill Skarsgård did get pretty swole for this role, see, Brandon Lee, he was a small frame guy. But if you notice, like when he's like walking around in the original movie, like he's not a big guy, but he flares his arms and his shoulders out enough to where almost like he kind of looks like a crow, or the crow when its wings are spread out. And even when he's walking around like he's a hunter looking for his prey. Now, in the 2024 version with Bill Skarsgård, we don't really get that. We see him walking around with more just kind of like a chip on his shoulder, or walking around with an attitude. And even in the original version, when we see Brandon Lee jumping from rooftop to rooftop, and in the scenes, it makes it look like almost like he's flying, just like a crow would fly. And we don't really get that in this version. So I get that you can't emulate exactly what Brandon Lee did due to the physical differences that these two different people had. So I'm not going to knock Bill Skarsgård's performance with the way he moves around and stuff like that, because I think he's doing it the best way that he can, and I think it works well for him. But not only that, watching this trailer, Bill Skarsgård is like the only person showing any emotion in this trailer. Everyone else is stone-faced and stoic. Like him, when you see him being choked to death, you see that intensity in his face, the sadness, the fear. And when he comes back, you see the anger that he has. And when he's like, beating these guys up, like he's showing no mercy. Like he takes his shotgun and just smashes this guy's face with it. No mercy. You see him walking in that scene, like I said, that looked like they were out of a John Wick movie. And he's just cutting people up. And he's shooting people. No mercy. Not giving anything a second thought. However, he does scream a lot because he is getting shot up and he gets stabbed with a sword and all that kind of stuff. I hope they don't get too screamy in this movie, because we get it can get played out if they portray him as just constantly just yelling all the time. Now, the last positive thing I'm going to mention is the song that plays through the trailer. I thought it was pretty good. To me, I felt it set a good tone, it set a good vibe. At first I thought it was an Ozzy Osbourne song, but after doing a little research, it's actually Post Malone. It's off of one of his albums. Ozzy Osbourne just makes a guest appearance, as well as Travis Scott. So as far as I know, it's not an original. It comes from a different Post Malone album. So I am curious to see how this soundtrack is going to be, because the original soundtrack was legendary. I mean, I mentioned before who was on it. If you haven't heard it, go pick it up, go listen to it. It's awesome. It's just, there's nothing more I can say. It's just a great soundtrack. I don't think, I'm going to speculate. I don't think that this soundtrack is going to be as good as that soundtrack. I don't want this movie to be bad. I don't want the soundtrack to be bad. I want it to be good. I just know that it's just not going to be on the same level as the original movie. I'm not hoping it to do terrible in the box office or anything like that. But all I want to happen when people do remakes and reboots of movies, and movies based on comics, and movies based on video games, is I want them to stay true to the source material. I want them to respect the fans. I want them to just acknowledge all those people who've put so much time and effort into these industries and into these stories. There's a reason why these movies are being remade in the first place. It's because of the fans talking about them, making videos about them, making fan-made films, and spreading their love for them all throughout the internet, which garners the attention of these big studio execs to dump all this money into a movie, which will hopefully give some of that love back to the fan base. Well, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. I had a lot to say, most of it negative, some of it positive, but like I said, I always hope for the best. And I just encourage everyone else out there to hope for the best as well. And I totally like to hear about your take about this trailer, so go ahead and throw that in the comments below. And once again, I appreciate every single one of you out there, and I will see you next time.